My name is Anita, and at 29 years old, I found myself in a hospital delivery room completely alone. The contractions rippled through my body while my phone buzzed endlessly on the side table. My ex-husband Daniel was calling again probably the 20th time today. 8 months ago, I walked away from our divorce with a secret growing inside me that he still knows nothing about. He keeps begging me to come back, sending flowers and apologies, completely unaware that I already have everything he thought I lost. Before I share my journey, tell me where you're watching from. Like and subscribe if you believe in the power of silent strength, and stay with me as I reveal how keeping this secret became my greatest victory. 2 years ago, I met Daniel at the law firm where I worked as a paralegal in Manhattan. He was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, successful, with that confident smile that made everyone in the room turn their heads. Our romance moved fast, the kind of whirlwind that makes you feel like you're living in a movie. Coffee dates turned into dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants. Weekend trips to the Hamptons became our routine. After just 8 months of dating, he proposed to me on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, and I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small but elegant, held at a vineyard in upstate New York. My parents flew in from Seattle. His family came from Boston, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. We moved into a beautiful apartment on the Upper East Side with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I remember standing in our living room that first morning after moving in, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold, thinking I had everything I ever dreamed of. But dreams have a way of crumbling when you least expect it. The changes started small, so subtle I almost missed them. Daniel began working later, his quick lunch breaks turning into lengthy client dinners. His phone, which used to lie carelessly on the counter, suddenly required a password. When it rang, he would step out onto the balcony to answer, closing the door behind him. The scent of unfamiliar perfume would sometimes linger on his suit jacket, a floral note that wasn't mine. I tried to push away the doubts. Marriage required trust, I told myself. This was just a busy period at his firm. The economy was tough, and corporate lawyers had to work harder to keep their clients happy. I filled my evenings with yoga classes and book clubs, anything to avoid sitting alone in our apartment wondering where my husband really was. Then came the night everything shattered. Daniel had said he was at a client dinner in Midtown, but I happened to be walking past his office building after my Pilates class and saw his office light on. I went up thinking I would surprise him with his favorite Thai takeout from the place around the corner. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt endless. When I pushed open his office door, I found him with Brittany, a 22-year-old Harvard graduate who had just joined the firm. They weren't doing anything physical, but the way they jumped apart, the guilty looks on their faces, told me everything I needed to know. Daniel tried to explain, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. It was nothing, just work. She was helping with a case. I was being paranoid. But I had already seen the text messages on his phone bill, the late-night calls, the hotel charges on our credit card statement. Brittany stood there, smoothing down her skirt, unable to meet my eyes. She was everything I wasn't. Fresh out of law school, ambitious, with that hungry look that said she would do anything to climb the ladder. The confrontation that followed was ugly. Daniel accused me of being insecure, of not understanding the demands of his career. He said I had become boring, too focused on domestic life, that I didn't excite him anymore. Each word cut deeper than the last, dismantling 3 years of marriage in mere minutes. When I showed him the evidence I had gathered, his demeanor changed. Suddenly he was apologizing, begging, promising it meant nothing and would never happen again. But I was done. The trust was broken, shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. I filed for divorce the next week, using a lawyer recommended by a friend who had been through something similar. Daniel fought it at first, showing up at my yoga studio, sending elaborate bouquets to my office, writing long emails about how he would change. His mother called me, pleading for me to give him another chance, reminding me that all marriages face challenges. The divorce was finalized in March. I signed the papers in a cold conference room while rain pelted against the windows. Daniel signed after me, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote his name. When it was over, we stood in the parking lot for a moment, neither knowing what to say. He reached for me, but I stepped back, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. I had already packed my things and arranged for movers to take them to a storage unit. That night I stayed in a hotel near Newark Airport, and the next morning I drove to Pennsylvania to start over. I chose Doylestown because it was far enough from New York to avoid accidental encounters, but close enough that I could still freelance for my old contacts. The rental house was small, a two-bedroom cottage with a wraparound porch and a garden that had been left to grow wild. It was nothing like our Manhattan apartment, but it was mine. I spent the first week painting the walls soft yellows and warm grays that made the space feel like hope instead of heartbreak. 2 weeks after arriving in Doylestown, I started feeling different. At first, I attributed the nausea to stress. The divorce had taken its toll, and starting over in a new place was harder than I expected. But when the fatigue became overwhelming, and I realized my period was late, a different possibility crept into my mind. I drove 40 minutes to a CVS in a town where no one would recognize me and bought 5 pregnancy tests, different brands, just to be sure. I sat on the bathroom floor of my rental cottage watching those 5 tests develop their results. One by one, they all showed the same thing. 2 pink lines. Positive. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind as I stared at the evidence lined up on the counter. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, still flat, giving no sign of the life growing inside. The internal battle that followed was exhausting. Part of me wanted to call Daniel immediately. He had a right to know, didn't he? This was his child too. But then I remembered all the times during our marriage when the subject of children came up. He would always deflect, saying we should wait, that his career needed to be more established first, that kids would complicate things. Once, after his brother had visited with his twin toddlers, Daniel had said outright that he wasn't sure he ever wanted children. The noise, the mess, the responsibility, it all seemed to overwhelm him. I thought about what would happen if I told him. Would he think I was trying to trap him back into the marriage? Would he demand partial custody and bring the child around whatever new girlfriend he found? Could I bear to watch my baby be introduced to the woman who helped destroy my marriage? The thought made my stomach turn in a way that had nothing to do with morning sickness. For 3 days, I barely left my bed, wrestling with the decision. I called in sick to my freelance projects and lived on crackers and ginger ale. On the 4th day, I made my choice. This baby was mine. Daniel had chosen his path when he chose Brittany over our marriage. He had walked away from the life we built together, and I wouldn't let him walk in and out of this child's life whenever it suited him. The planning that followed was meticulous. I shifted all my work to remote-only contracts, telling clients I was focusing on digital nomad lifestyle. I deleted my social media accounts, explaining to the few friends who noticed that I was doing a digital detox. When mutual friends from New York called, I kept conversations short and vague, mentioning I was traveling, finding myself all the cliches that people expected to hear from a newly divorced woman. I found a local obstetrician in a small practice where nobody asked too many questions. Dr. Patricia Martinez was in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach that I appreciated. When I told her I was doing this alone, she simply nodded and said she would make sure I had all the support I needed. She never pushed for details about the father, though I could see the curiosity in her eyes. The hardest part was hiding the physical changes. Morning sickness hit me hard in the first trimester, and there were days when I could barely keep water down. I had video calls with clients where I had to mute myself to run to the bathroom. By the 4th month, my body began to change in obvious ways. I invested in oversized sweaters and flowing cardigans, always positioning my laptop camera at angles that showed only my face and shoulders. When my old coworker Jennifer suggested meeting for lunch in Philadelphia, I made excuses about having the flu. When my mother wanted to visit from Seattle, I told her I was swamped with a huge project and promised to fly out to see her instead, knowing I never would until after the baby came. Each lie felt like a small betrayal, but I held on to the bigger picture. This was about protecting my child and myself from a situation that could only bring pain. I started a journal for the baby, writing letters about why I made this choice. I wanted my child to understand someday that it wasn't about spite or revenge. It was about creating a stable, peaceful environment free from the drama and disappointment that Daniel brought into my life. I wrote about the little moments too. The first flutter I felt at 16 weeks that made me gasp in the middle of a grocery store. The way my body was changing, expanding to accommodate this new life. The dreams I had for who this little person might become. The months of pregnancy passed in a strange bubble of isolation and preparation. During my 3rd through 5th months, I threw myself into creating a sanctuary for my baby. The 2nd bedroom of my cottage transformed into a nursery. I painted it myself, soft sage green walls with white trim, working slowly and taking breaks when my back ached. I assembled the crib alone, sitting on the floor with the instruction manual, feeling both proud and lonely as I tightened each screw. My freelance graphic design work became my lifeline both financially and emotionally. I could lose myself in creating logos and websites while my baby somersaulted inside me. Clients never knew that I was designing their corporate identities while wearing maternity pants held up with a belly band. The income was steady enough to build a solid savings account, something that gave me peace of mind about raising this child alone. The 20-week ultrasound revealed I was having a girl. The technician pointed out her profile on the screen, her tiny nose and lips perfectly visible. I cried right there on the examination table, overwhelmed by love for this little person I hadn't even met yet. That night I decided on her name. Emma. Simple, classic, strong. Emma Marie, after my grandmother, who had raised 6 children on her own after my grandfather died young. I spent evenings in thrift stores and on Facebook Marketplace finding treasures for Emma's room. A vintage rocking chair that I reupholstered in soft white fabric. A bookshelf that I filled with classic children's books from yard sales. I knitted blankets while watching Netflix, my hands working steadily as my belly grew rounder. Each item I added to her room felt like a promise. I would give her everything she needed, with or without her father. During months 6 and 7, Daniel's attempts to reconnect intensified. The divorce had been final for months, but suddenly he seemed to realize what he had lost. The first text came on a Tuesday evening, just a simple "I miss you" that made my heart race with anxiety. I deleted it without responding. Then came the calls, voicemails filled with apologies and regrets. He said he had ended things with Brittany, that he realized she meant nothing to him, that I was the love of his life. Flowers began arriving at my old apartment building in New York, where the doorman would call to tell me about them. Expensive bouquets of peonies and roses, my favorites, with cards that said things like, "Please forgive me," and "You're all I think about." I told the doorman to donate them to a nearby hospital. Daniel sent emails, too long, rambling messages about how he was in therapy, how he understood what he had done wrong, how he would do anything for another chance. His mother Eleanor called one evening while I was eating ice cream and watching baby videos on YouTube. My phone lit up with her name, and I let it go to voicemail. Her message was tearful, saying Daniel was a mess without me, that he had learned his lesson, that everyone deserved a second chance. I almost felt bad for her. She didn't know she was about to become a grandmother, but I couldn't risk telling her. Eleanor had never been good at keeping secrets, and she would have told Daniel immediately. In my 8th month, the physical challenges became harder to hide. My belly was enormous, and even the baggiest sweaters couldn't completely disguise it. I stopped leaving the house except for essential trips, having groceries delivered and doing prenatal appointments. One evening, I had Braxton Hicks contractions so intense I thought I was going into early labor. I drove myself to the emergency room, terrified and alone, only to be told it was false labor and to go home and rest. That experience made me realize I needed some support, even if I couldn't tell anyone the full truth. I hired a doula named Maria, a warm 50-year-old woman from Mexico who had helped deliver hundreds of babies. I told her I was a widow, that my husband had died in a car accident shortly after I got pregnant. She held my hand when I cried during our first meeting, not knowing I was crying for a different kind of loss. Daniel hired a private investigator in my 8th month. I found out because the investigator was sloppy and asked my former neighbor in New York too many questions. She called to warn me that someone was looking for me. I panicked thinking about moving again, but I was too pregnant to handle another upheaval. Instead, I became even more careful. I did grocery shopping at odd hours, wearing baggy coats and keeping my head down. Once I saw a man who looked like Daniel's friend Robert at a gas station, and I hid in my car until he left my heart pounding so hard I worried it would stress the baby. During my 9th month, I nested with an intensity that surprised me. Every surface in the cottage was scrubbed clean. I pre-made and froze 30 meals, labeling each container with cooking instructions. The hospital bag was packed and repacked, tiny newborn outfits, washed in gentle detergent and folded perfectly. I practiced the drive to the hospital at different times of day, timing how long it took, noting where I could pull over if needed. I wrote Emma letters for her future birthdays, sealing them in envelopes marked with ages. One for her first birthday, her 5th, her 13th, her 18th. In each one, I tried to explain my choices to help her understand that she was conceived in love, even if that love had turned complicated. I told her about her father's good qualities too. His intelligence, his humor in better times, his passion for his work. I wanted her to know that she came from two people who had once loved each other deeply, even if that love couldn't survive. Daniel's last email before Emma's birth arrived 3 days before I went into labor. It was different from the others. Calmer, more reflective. He wrote about walking through Central Park and remembering our first date there, how we had fed ducks at the pond and talked for hours. He said he finally understood that he had thrown away something precious for something meaningless. He was moving to a smaller apartment, starting fresh, hoping that somehow our paths would cross again. He signed it, "Forever yours, even if I lost the right to say it." I read it while having mild contractions, tears streaming down my face, my hand on my belly feeling Emma kick. Labor started at 3 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday in November. I woke to a wetness between my legs and a deep grinding pain in my lower back. For a moment, I lay there in the darkness, processing what was happening. This was it. Emma was coming. I was about to give birth completely alone without her father even knowing she existed. I called Maria, my doula, and she told me to time the contractions and come to the hospital when they were 5 minutes apart. I showered, trying to stay calm as waves of pain rolled through my body. I put on the comfortable clothes I had laid out weeks ago, a soft gray dress that buttoned down the front for easy nursing access. Between contractions, I moved around the cottage, checking that everything was ready for when we came home. The drive to the hospital was surreal. Rain pelted the windshield as I white-knuckled the steering wheel, breathing through contractions at red lights. I had to pull over twice when the pain became too intense to focus on the road. Each time I thought about calling Daniel about how he should be the one driving me, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. But then I remembered Brittany remembered the betrayal and kept driving. I checked in at the hospital under the name Anna Thompson, a precaution I had arranged weeks earlier with the administration, explaining I was escaping a dangerous situation. It wasn't entirely a lie. The emotional danger Daniel could inflict was real enough. The registration nurse was kind, helping me into a wheelchair between contractions, not asking questions about why I was alone. The labor room was sterile and cold, nothing like the warm birthing suite Daniel and I had once toured at a fancy Manhattan hospital during better times. Maria arrived within an hour, bringing warmth and calm energy. She held my hand, rubbed my back, reminded me to breathe when the pain made me want to scream. The nurses came and went, checking my dilation, monitoring Emma's heartbeat, adjusting the IV that delivered fluids into my arm. My phone sat on the bedside table, buzzing insistently. Daniel had called 27 times since midnight. I don't know what prompted this particular burst of attempts, maybe some subconscious connection to his child being born, or just another wave of regret. Each time it rang, Maria would glance at it, then at me, but she never asked who was calling. She had probably figured out I wasn't really a widow, but she respected my privacy. The pain intensified as morning turned to afternoon. I had planned to do this without an epidural, wanting to feel everything to be fully present for Emma's arrival. But by hour 10, I was exhausted and overwhelmed. The anesthesiologist was a young woman who reminded me of my sister, gentle and reassuring, as she inserted the needle into my spine. The relief was immediate and profound, allowing me to rest for a few hours before the real work began. At 5 in the afternoon, Dr. Martinez checked me and announced it was time to push. This was the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated for 9 months, bringing a life into the world with no one who truly loved me by my side. Maria held one leg, a nurse held the other, and I pushed with everything I had. The pain was different now, purposeful, productive. Each push brought Emma closer to the world. I thought about Daniel during those 2 hours of pushing, about how he should have been there coaching me, cutting the cord, being the first to hold his daughter. I thought about the family we should have been the moment this should have been. But I also thought about my own strength, about how I had carried this child alone, prepared for her alone, and now would birth her alone. There was power in that solitude, a fierce independence that made me feel invincible, even as my body felt like it was splitting apart. At 7:23 in the evening, Emma entered the world with a cry that was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. They placed her on my chest, immediately wet and screaming and perfect. She was 7 pounds 2 ounces of pure miracle. Her eyes, when she opened them, were Daniel's, bright blue, but her chin, her nose, those were mine. I sobbed as I held her, overwhelmed by love so intense it felt like it might break me open. The nurse asked if I wanted to call anyone to share the news. I shook my head, unable to speak through the tears. This moment was ours alone, Emma's and mine. We had done this together, just the two of us, and for now that was enough. Maria took photos with my phone, capturing Emma's first moments, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her perfect rosebud mouth yawning. As the nurses cleaned and measured Emma, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Daniel. Against my better judgment, I listened to it while Emma was being swaddled. His voice was broken, desperate. "I know I lost the best thing in my life. I know you'll probably never forgive me. But I need you to know that I love you. I'll love you forever. Please just give me one more chance to prove it." I deleted the message and turned off my phone. My daughter was here, healthy and beautiful, and that was all that mattered. Daniel could keep his regrets and his promises. Emma and I had everything we needed right here in this hospital room. Each other. The first 3 weeks at home with Emma passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. My cottage, once so quiet and lonely, now filled with the sounds of baby coos and cries. I moved through the days in a haze of exhaustion and wonder, marveling at this tiny person who depended on me for everything. Emma was a good baby, only crying when she needed something, content to lie in my arms for hours as I sang to her or read her stories. I documented everything with my phone camera. Her first bath at home, where she screamed the entire time. The way she stretched when waking up, arms flung above her head like a tiny gymnast. Her milk-drunk face after nursing, eyes rolled back in complete satisfaction. These photos were just for us, not for social media or sharing. They were evidence of our life together, proof that we were doing just fine on our own. Maria checked in on us twice during those first weeks, bringing homemade pozole and holding Emma while I showered. She never asked about Emma's father, but once she said quietly that Emma was lucky to have such a strong mother. I cried after she left, grateful for this small kindness from someone who understood without needing all the details. The pediatrician appointments were at a clinic 1 town over, extra precaution against running into anyone who might know Daniel. Emma was thriving, gaining weight, perfectly hitting all her milestones. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Thompson, praised my attentiveness, saying single mothers often work twice as hard, and it showed. I carried his words like a badge of honor. It was at Emma's 3-week checkup that everything changed. I had just finished nursing her in the waiting room when the door opened and Daniel walked in with his sister Catherine and her newborn son. The world seemed to stop spinning. He froze in the doorway, his eyes moving from my face to the baby in my arms. Catherine gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Emma chose that moment to turn her head, and Daniel saw her properly for the first time. The recognition was immediate. She had his distinctive blue eyes, the same shaped nose, the identical cowlick in her blonde hair that he constantly tried to tame. His face went white, then red, then white again. His mouth opened and closed without sound like a fish gasping for air. The waiting room was full of other parents and children, all pretending not to notice the drama unfolding. I stood up slowly, Emma against my chest, her diaper bag over my shoulder. I needed to leave to get away before this became even more of a scene. But Daniel stepped forward, blocking my path to the door. His voice, when he finally found it, was barely a whisper. Is she mine? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Emma made a small sound, and I adjusted her position, pulling her closer. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 9 months of secrets and lies. Catherine stood behind him, tears streaming down her face as she pieced together the timeline, realizing her brother had a child he never knew about. How old is she? Daniel's voice cracked on the question. 3 weeks. The words came out strong and clear, surprising me. I watched him do the math in his head, saw the moment he understood. She had been conceived while we were still married, before Brittany, before everything fell apart. His legs seemed to give out, and he sank into a waiting room chair, head in his hands. Catherine rushed to him, but he waved her away, his shoulders shaking. You were pregnant during the divorce. It wasn't a question. You were pregnant, and you didn't tell me. You made your choice. My voice was steady now, protective mama bear instincts kicking in. You chose her. You chose that life. This is mine. He looked up at me, and I saw something broken in his eyes. She's my daughter. I have a daughter, and you didn't tell me. How could you not tell me? Emma started to fuss, picking up on the tension. I bounced her, gently humming the lullaby that always calmed her. Several people in the waiting room were openly staring now. Catherine tried to usher Daniel outside, but he wouldn't move. He couldn't take his eyes off Emma, drinking in every detail of her tiny face. What's her name? The question was soft, almost reverent. Emma. Emma Marie. After your grandmother. He remembered. Of course he did. We had talked about baby names once, lying in bed on a lazy Sunday morning in what felt like another lifetime. Emma had been at the top of my list for a girl. Please. He stood up slowly, carefully, like he was afraid of spooking me. Please, can I hold her? Just once. She's my daughter. Please. Every instinct screamed no. This man had shattered my heart, destroyed our marriage, chosen another woman over our life together. But looking at him now, tears running down his face as he stared at his daughter, I saw past the anger to something deeper. He was Emma's father, whether I liked it or not. She was half him, would always be half him. But not here. Not like this, with an audience and emotions running so high. Not here. Not now. When? He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, the same one he always wore, sending memories flooding back. Anita, please. I know I don't deserve it. I know I ruined everything. But she's my child. Please don't keep her from me. The nurse called Emma's name for her appointment. I had never been so grateful for timing. I moved past Daniel, careful not to let him touch Emma. At the door to the examination rooms, I turned back. He stood there looking destroyed, Catherine's hand on his arm. I'll call you. I said, not sure if I meant it. Then I disappeared through the door, leaving him standing there with the knowledge that he was a father and had already missed the first 3 weeks of his daughter's life. After the confrontation at the pediatrician's office, I knew there was no going back to our secret existence. Daniel knew about Emma now, and with that knowledge came complications I had hoped to avoid. I spent 2 days ignoring his calls and messages, trying to figure out my next move, while Emma slept peacefully in her bassinet, unaware that her world was about to change. On the 3rd day, I called my lawyer, Jennifer Paulson, a fierce woman in her 50s who specialized in custody cases. I explained everything from the affair to the pregnancy to keeping Emma secret. She listened without judgment, then laid out my options with clinical precision. I could deny Daniel access, but he would likely take me to court and win at least partial custody. Or I could control the situation by setting terms now while he was desperate and guilty. I chose control. Jennifer drafted a comprehensive parenting agreement that gave me primary custody, with Daniel having supervised visits that would gradually increase as Emma got older. He would pay child support based on his substantial income, set up a college fund, and provide health insurance. Most importantly, he couldn't introduce Emma to any romantic partners without my written consent and 6 months' notice. I texted Daniel to meet me at Jennifer's office that Friday. He arrived looking haggard, like he hadn't slept since seeing Emma. He came alone, which surprised me. I expected him to bring his own lawyer to fight me on the terms. But he sat across the conference table and agreed to everything without argument. His only request was to start visits immediately. "I've already missed so much." His voice was hoarse, defeated. "The pregnancy, the birth her first weeks. Please don't make me miss any more." Jennifer gave me a look that said it was my call. I thought about Emma, about her right to know her father despite his failures as a husband. Supervised visits, 2 hours twice a week. Maria will be present. Who's Maria? My doula. She helped deliver Emma when you were too busy with your 22-year-old to know your daughter was being born. The words were cruel, meant to wound, and they hit their mark. He flinched like I had slapped him. Brittany means nothing to me. She never did. I was an idiot having some kind of crisis. She's pregnant with her boyfriend's baby now. They're getting married. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had destroyed our marriage for a woman who was now building a family with someone else, while he sat here begging to be part of the family he had thrown away. The first visit was the following Tuesday. Daniel arrived at my cottage with an SUV full of baby items I didn't need. An expensive stroller, designer baby clothes, toys, appropriate for a toddler rather than a 3-week-old. He stood on my porch looking nervous, like a teenager picking up his prom date. Maria let him in while I sat in the rocking chair holding Emma. When I placed Emma in his arms for the first time, he broke down completely, sobbing in a way I had never seen in our 4 years together. Emma stared up at him with those blue eyes that matched his perfectly, and his tears fell on her pink onesie. Maria and I exchanged glances, both uncomfortable with his raw emotion, but understanding it too. "She's perfect," he whispered, tracing her tiny features with one finger. "She looks like you. She has your eyes, but your spirit, I can already tell." He looked up at me. "Thank you. I know you don't have to do this." Over the next weeks, Daniel proved himself more committed than I expected. He never missed a visit, arriving early and staying until the last possible minute. He learned to change diapers with Maria's guidance, mastering the technique faster than I had. He bought parenting books and actually read them, asking thoughtful questions about Emma's development and needs. During one visit, while Emma slept in his arms, he told me about the nursery he had set up in his new apartment. Soft pink walls, a crib identical to mine, so Emma would feel comfortable, a rocking chair where he practiced holding a teddy bear to prepare for holding her. The image was so pathetic and sweet that I had to leave the room to compose myself. He also told me about his therapy. Twice-a-week sessions where he was working through what he called his self-destructive tendencies. He was examining why he had sabotaged our marriage, why he had chosen temporary excitement over lasting love. His therapist had diagnosed him with commitment anxiety that manifested in destructive ways when life got too comfortable, too real. I was scared of becoming a father. He admitted one afternoon while Emma grabbed his finger with her tiny fist. Not because I didn't want children, but because I was terrified of failing them like my dad failed me. I knew about his father's affairs, the way they had destroyed his parents' marriage when Daniel was 12. I had thought he was different, that he had learned from those mistakes. Instead, he had repeated them. Meanwhile, my life was expanding in unexpected ways. The single mothers group I joined at the community center became a source of real friendship. Women who understood the unique challenges of raising children alone, who didn't judge my story or my choices. We met for coffee while wearing our babies, and carriers shared tips on everything from sleep training to managing finances on one income. Through the group, I met Thomas. He was a widower raising his 2-year-old son after losing his wife to cancer. We bonded over the challenges of single parenthood, though our circumstances were vastly different. He was kind and steady, everything Daniel hadn't been. When he asked me to dinner after 6 weeks of friendship, I surprised myself by saying yes. Maria agreed to babysit Emma for a few hours, and I went on my first date since my divorce. Thomas took me to a quiet Italian restaurant where we talked about everything except our children, remembering what it was like to be adults, with interests beyond diaper brands and feeding schedules. When he kissed me goodnight on my porch, gentle and respectful, I felt something in me awaken that I thought Daniel had killed. I didn't tell Daniel about Thomas right away, but he figured it out when he saw a man's jacket on my coat rack during a visit. His face went through several expressions before settling on resigned acceptance. He had no right to be jealous, and we both knew it. But I saw him hold Emma a little tighter that day, whisper promises to her about always being her daddy, no matter what. The turning point came when Emma was 4 months old. Daniel arrived for his visit looking exhausted and defeated. His mother had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, and he was struggling to process it. Without thinking, I made him coffee the way he liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, and sat with him while he talked. For an hour, we weren't exes with a complicated history. We were just 2 people who had once loved each other sharing a moment of human connection. "I'm going to lose her the way she's already lost me," he said, staring into his coffee. "She doesn't understand why you're not in my life anymore. She keeps asking when you're coming to Sunday dinner." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I destroyed everything good in my life." He looked at Emma sleeping in her bouncer. "But somehow you still gave me her. Even after everything you're letting me be her father. I don't deserve that grace. It's not for you. It's for her. Every child deserves to know both parents, even imperfect ones." He nodded, understanding. "Is he good to you, Thomas?" I was surprised he knew the name. "Yes." "Good. You deserve that. You deserve someone who knows your worth from the start, not someone who had to lose you to see it." Emma's first birthday arrived on a crisp November day, exactly 1 year after her dramatic entrance into the world. I had spent weeks planning a small party in the backyard of our cottage. Nothing elaborate, just close friends from our single parents group, Maria and her family, and Thomas with his son Jack. The yard was decorated with pink and gold balloons, a banner that read, "1 year of magic," stretched between 2 trees. Daniel arrived early, as I knew he would. Our custody arrangement had evolved over the months to include more flexibility, though always with clear boundaries. He helped set up tables and chairs without being asked, knowing where everything went from his regular visits. Emma reached for him from her high chair, calling out "Dada" with a huge smile. She had said it for the first time a month ago, and the look on his face then had been something I would never forget. Thomas was gracious about Daniel's presence, understanding the complex dynamics without making it awkward. The 2 men had met several times now, maintaining civility for Emma's sake. Thomas had even commented once that he respected how committed Daniel was to being present for Emma despite the circumstances. It was more maturity than I might have managed in his position. As guests arrived, I watched Emma interact with everyone, her personality shining through. She had Daniel's outgoing nature, but my determination. When she wanted something, she would pursue it with single-minded focus until she succeeded. Her first steps had been just 2 weeks ago, lurching between my outstretched arms and Daniel's. During one of his visits, both of us cheering like she had won an Olympic medal. The party flowed naturally, children playing in the yard, while adults chatted over cake and coffee. Daniel took countless photos, having become the unofficial photographer of Emma's life. He had created a digital album that he shared with me monthly, every milestone captured and cataloged. It was his way of making up for missing the pregnancy and birth, documenting everything he could now. When it came time for cake, we all sang while Emma sat in her high chair, eyes wide with wonder at the single candle flame. She grabbed a handful of chocolate cake and smeared it across her face, laughing with pure joy as everyone clapped. Daniel and I stood on either side of her, both helping to blow out the candle when she couldn't quite manage it. For a moment, we looked like the family we might have been in another timeline. As the party wound down, Daniel stayed to help clean up. Thomas had taken Jack home for his nap, kissing my cheek and telling me he would call later. The other guests gradually departed, leaving just Daniel, Emma, and me in the backyard as the sun began to set. Emma toddled between us, picking up leaves and examining them with serious concentration. "Thank you," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "For what?" "For this. For letting me be here. For not poisoning her against me. For being a better person than I deserved." I watched Emma chase a butterfly, her laughter filling the air. I did it for her. A child shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. "Still, you could have made this ugly. God knows I gave you enough reason to. But you didn't. You've let me be her father even though I failed at being your husband. You're a good father, Daniel. Whatever else happened between us, you've shown up for her. That matters." He nodded, his eyes on Emma. "I love her more than I thought possible. She's the best thing I've ever done, even if I didn't know I was doing it." Emma toddled over to him, holding up a particularly interesting stick she had found. He picked her up, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. She babbled at him in her mix of real words and baby talk, and he responded as if having a serious conversation about the stick's qualities. "I need to tell you something," he said, his tone shifting. "I've been offered a position in Boston. Better money chance to make partner in 2 years. My mom's there, and with her diagnosis, I could help my sister with her care." My stomach dropped. The thought of him taking Emma away even partially made me feel sick. "What about Emma?" "That's why I'm telling you. I'm not taking it. I won't be that father who sees his kid every other weekend. I won't miss any more of her life than I already have. The job, the money, none of it matters more than being here for her. And honestly for you too, even if it's just as co-parents." The relief was overwhelming. Despite everything, Daniel had become a constant in our lives. Emma needed him, and maybe I had come to depend on his presence too in a different way than before. "You've changed," I observed. "Losing everything you love will do that." He kissed Emma's head as she started to get sleepy, her energy finally depleting after the exciting day. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Are you happy? With Thomas with your life now?" I considered the question. "Yes, it's different than what I planned, but yes, I'm happy." "Good. That's all I wanted to know." As he handed Emma to me for bedtime, our hands touched briefly. There was no spark, no lingering desire. That part of us had died with his betrayal. But there was something else, a understanding, a shared commitment to the little girl yawning in my arms. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep and the last of the party supplies were put away, I found the journal I had kept during my pregnancy. I read through the entries, remembering the fear, anger, and determination that had carried me through those 9 months. The woman who wrote those words felt like a stranger now, though I was grateful for her strength. I wrote a new entry, the first in months. Emma is 1 year old today. Her father was here helping celebrate, taking photos, being present in a way I never imagined when I gave birth alone. We aren't a traditional family, may never be what society expects, but we're Emma's family. Daniel and I will never be husband and wife again, but we've become something maybe more important, true co-parents. Thomas makes me laugh and holds me when the single mom life gets overwhelming. Maria has become like family. Emma is surrounded by love from all angles. Sometimes the loudest statement is made in complete silence. My silence during those 9 months wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about finding my own strength, building my own foundation, proving to myself that I could do this alone. Now I know I can, which makes choosing to let others in so much more powerful. Emma will grow up knowing her mother chose herself first, chose stability over drama, chose peace over passion. And in that choice, we found everything. The man who left me for another woman now treasures every moment with our daughter. The woman he left behind built a life so full that his absence became just a footnote. The baby who grew in secret is now celebrated, openly loved by many. the center of a unique but beautiful family structure. I didn't tell anyone I was pregnant after the divorce. I gave birth alone in silence while my ex begged to come back, not knowing I already had everything he thought I lost. And in that silence, I found my voice. In that solitude, I found my strength. In that pain, I found my purpose. Emma's life began with a secret, but it won't be defined by it. She'll know her story when she's old enough to understand. She'll know her mother was brave, her father was flawed but trying, and that love comes in many forms. She'll know that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Tomorrow Daniel will come for his regular Tuesday visit. Thomas and I will take Emma and Jack to the park on Wednesday. Thursday is my single moms group. Life will continue in this new rhythm we've created, imperfect but genuine. And that's more than enough. It's everything. Looking back at this year, I see how far we've all come. Daniel learned that some mistakes can't be undone, only worked around. He lost a wife but gained a daughter and learned to be a better man in the process. I learned that strength isn't about doing everything alone, but about choosing who to let in and when. Emma, in her innocent wisdom, loves freely and completely, not knowing or caring about the complicated history that brought her into being. When people ask me if I regret keeping my pregnancy secret, I always say no. Those 9 months of silence gave me time to grieve my marriage, find my strength, and prepare for motherhood on my own terms. By the time Daniel discovered Emma's existence, I had already built our foundation. I wasn't a desperate ex-wife trying to win him back with a baby. I was a confident mother who had already proven she could do this alone, which made sharing Emma with him a choice rather than a necessity. The silence also taught Daniel valuable lessons he might not have learned otherwise. Missing Emma's birth. Her first weeks the pregnancy experienced, these losses haunt him in a way that keeps him present now. He knows what it costs to lose your family, which makes him fight to keep his place in Emma's life. Every milestone he witnesses is precious, because he knows how many he missed. As I write this final chapter of our story, Emma is asleep upstairs in her toddler bed, the one Thomas helped me assemble last week. Tomorrow is a new day full of possibilities. Daniel will probably text in the morning asking how Emma slept, if she ate her breakfast, what outfit I put her in. Thomas will call during his lunch break just to say hello. Maria will stop by with fresh tortillas and stay for coffee. This isn't the life I imagined when I married Daniel 3 years ago. It's messier, more complicated, full of negotiations and boundaries and careful scheduling. But it's also richer than anything I could have planned. Emma has a village raising her people who chose to love her rather than being obligated to. She has a mother who knows her own strength, a father who learned from his mistakes, and an extended chosen family who show up consistently. The most profound truth I've learned is that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the deepest pain. My divorce led to Emma. Daniel's affair led to his transformation. My silence led to my strength. Every broken piece rebuilt itself into something more resilient than before. To anyone watching who has faced betrayal, who has had to make impossible choices, who has carried secrets that felt too heavy to bear, know this. Your silence can be your power. Your pain can be your teacher. Your broken dreams can be the foundation for something better than you imagined. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you already have everything you need within yourself. What started as a story about keeping a pregnancy secret became a story about redemption, unconventional families, and the many forms love can take. Emma will never have the traditional nuclear family that society says is best. But she will have something perhaps more valuable. A mother who chose courage over comfort, a father who learned from failure, and a community of people who actively choose to be present in her life. As I close this chapter of our journey, I want to leave you with this thought. The loudest statement truly is sometimes made in complete silence. In choosing not to tell Daniel about my pregnancy, I wasn't being vindictive or cruel. I was protecting my peace, building my strength, and creating a stable foundation for my daughter. By the time the silence broke, I had already proven to myself and everyone else that I didn't need Daniel to be whole. That knowledge changed everything. It meant that when I did let him into Emma's life, it was from a position of strength rather than desperation. If you're facing a difficult decision about whether to share information, whether to let someone back into your life, whether to break your silence, remember this. Your timeline is your own. Your healing is your priority. Your peace is worth protecting. And sometimes the best thing you can do is build your life in silence until you're strong enough that no one can shake your foundation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story resonated with you, if you face similar challenges or are currently navigating co-parenting after betrayal, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What choices did you make to protect your peace? How did you find strength in silence? Share your story, because sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the greatest gift we can give each other. Please remember to like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that they're stronger than they know. Your support helps these stories reach people who need to know they're not alone in their journey. Until next time, remember that your silence can be your strength, your pain can be your power, and sometimes the best revenge is building a life so beautiful that the past becomes irrelevant. Thank you for listening, and may you find your own path to peace, whatever that looks like for you.